Thank you, Satish, for inviting me. Thank you all for coming tonight. Now, before I read the opening pages of my short story, Cramped, you should know three things. One, the creamy cone mentioned in the story is not the actual name of the place, nor is it the creamy cone that we all love over on Dahl. I've changed most of the names in this story to protect the innocent. Two, the events in this story are all true. And three, this is the first and last time Deb did anything like this. Cramped. The van was an earth-brown Ford. It sat alone under a tree in the back of the Creamy Cone parking lot, where the town ended and countryside began, where crumbling asphalt looked even worse as it met up with an open field still lush from April's rain. A woman walked toward the van, trying not to be noticed. She was 30-something, still had a decent figure, better than most mothers in this hick town. And most days she had a decent head on her shoulders. Today, though, she wasn't so sure. The van had bucket seats up front, followed by 3 rows of benches, the final row being the longest as it stretched the entire width of the aging vehicle. The van spent most of its life behind the restaurant, except on the nights when Larry would have to drive home workers who were too young or too poor to have their own transportation. Deb knew the routine, knew it would be at least another 40 minutes before anyone would come out of the restaurant's back door for a smoke or to take out the trash, knew she had plenty of time to sneak into Larry's van. Despite it being in both their names, it was always his, and try to get comfortable. The van was not known for its comfort. This became obvious now as Deb competed for space with years of clutter behind the rear seat. Bracing herself with her left hand, she used her feet to push away empty motor oil bottles and dirty paper towels forward as far as possible. With her right hand, she reached up and grabbed the door handle, bringing the van's rear door completely shut behind her. Fully inside now, she began the process of getting settled in for God knows how long. She was going to have to stay in one position for a while, not move much, not make any noise. After several minutes of false positions, she finally chose knees slightly bent, feet pushing against the opposite wall as her head. She had just enough room to shift her weight slightly should, not should, when she would get uncomfortable. Deb remained motionless for as long as she could stand it. At first she strained to hear the outside world and listen for footsteps, but it didn't take long until she retreated into her thoughts, or more accurately, into her questions. Why had she married him right out of high school? What if she would have chosen college instead? Then the biggest question, the one she was hoping to answer once and for all. As she waited, staring up at the vinyl seat back and tinted rear window, she watched as the sun began to set, as it retreated further away to light someone else's world, watched as the blue in her jeans got darker, deeper, until it became nearly black. Midnight blue, her husband would have corrected her. Most days, Larry drove a 1977 midnight blue Corvette. Deb remembered the day he had brought it home nearly 5 years prior. "How'd you pay for that?" she'd asked in surprise. His answer still made her stomach burn. "You didn't really think we were going to waste money on that trip, did you?" They had never taken a honeymoon, but it was understood that someday they'd travel to Hawaii. Some of Deb's friends had used the purchase as an excuse to complain about Larry, to let flow the emotions that had been building up ever since he had knocked her up 3 months before their wedding. "No honeymoon? You deserve better. Money for a Corvette, but not for you? Mm-mm." Deb was raised in a small town in Minnesota where people eat hot dishes and go to church and are usually decent enough not to say the ugly truth to your face. Yeah, she was innocent and naive, but she knew it. She had her friends and her television. She hated missing her stories. And she was not entirely without knowledge about the ways of the world. Her years of working with Larry at the restaurant, as 1 and then 2 kids came along, had showed her the reality of a marriage with Larry. His laziness, his lack of customer service skills at times, and his extremely good customer service skills if the customer was young and female. Of course, things weren't perfect. She didn't need her friends to suggest that Larry might not be faithful. She already suspected that. Not that she had ever caught him or even come close. Larry always could account for where he was, never had any definite proof that something was off, but Deb felt it. In the way that women know things before they actually know them, it just felt like he was cheating. Hidden inside the van, what Deb felt now was cramped. Her butt and left leg were starting to fall asleep, but she was listening before shifting her weight. She had never done anything like this before, but she felt a surge of pride as she realized how stealthy she was being. First, listen for footsteps, then slowly shift her weight. It felt strangely exhilarating to do something behind Larry's back. Once, one of her friends had told her about some martial arts class, Tai Chi, being offered at the junior college, and it sounded peaceful and exotic. She thought, for a second, of doing it behind Larry's back. She didn't, of course. Ended up asking his opinion. "What do you need that for?" he said. "We need you at home, not off goofing around. Who's going to watch the kids?" So she never went and continued being the good little wife. Inside the van now, the good wife's thoughts were interrupted. Someone was coming. Deb heard shoes approaching on the broken blacktop, then teenage voices, then a girl's voice and a man's laughter. Deb held her breath until she realized she was holding her breath, and then let it out quietly and as slowly as possible, trying to keep her body from tensing as the van dipped first to the right, then to the left, as everyone came inside. The van's engine roared to life, giving the floor beneath Deb a small shake and then a constant vibration. The van had nowhere near the rumble of Larry's Corvette, but it still had plenty of power. Larry would never buy something designed for efficiency like one of those imports their neighbors had just bought. Only the biggest and best for him. "Okay, guys," she heard him speak from the driver's seat. "Same crew tomorrow night? Jim, let me know if you can't get Andy to cover for you." "Sure thing," replied a boy's voice. Deb recognized it as Jimmy Mortensen, one of the kids who'd been working for them a couple years now. "Larry, I might need next Saturday off." This new voice belonged to Lacey Hutchins. The girl was a grade ahead of her own daughter, a good worker, and they'd be lucky if they had her through the summer. By fall, she'd be off to college for sure. It seemed the brightest ones always fled town the first chance they got. Only the dumb ones like Deb stayed around year after year. She had asked Larry once after both kids were in grade school how he felt about her completing an associate's degree. "What do you need that for?" he said. The van was turning now, moving slower. They must be on a gravel road. Deb could hear the pebbles pinging off the bottom of the van. He must be dropping off Brian first, she thought. As predicted, the van slowed to a stop after another minute of driving, and she heard Brian's voice after the side door opened. "See you tomorrow, guys." The van turned around, sped up, slowed slightly, not a complete stop, Deb noticed. As it turned onto pavement again, then sped forward a few minutes, the tires creating a whirring sound. The radio had been silent, but now it turned on, and Deb strained to hear the conversation. She thought she could make out the words night and game, but she wasn't sure. The van slowed again, and Deb heard a girl's voice above her. The radio switched off. "What was that?" Larry asked. "Just saying have a good night, Mr. Johnson." Deb knew that voice. She had heard that sweet little voice many times before. Unfortunately, we don't have time for the rest of Cramped, and it's unpublished, so I'm not trying to sell you anything. But if you go on to facebook.com/thelonelywhale, and you like that page and you send me a message and you mention Cramped, I will email you a digital copy so you can read the rest if you want. What we do have time for is a little poem I wrote about a week ago on the subject of cheese. I've never written a poem on cheese, but someone inspired me to do that. I had discovered French cheese in Paris about a decade ago in a fromagerie, which is a cheese shop. I'd never tasted anything so stinkingly delicious. So naturally, when I went to Paris on my honeymoon, I wanted to find this cheese and picnic with my wife on the river overlooking the Notre Dame. This is that story. Fromagerie, fromagerie, on Rue des Commerces 66, so far away from Isle Cité, but the only place to get my fix. No slices wrapped in cellophane, no Munster that's been bastardized. Praise God, there are even cheeses here from milk 'twas never pasteurized. O king of cheeses, Brie de Mou and Camembert de Normandie, Neufchâtel and Chevrotine and Munster Jeremy, oui, oui. Too many choices to pick just one. We settle on a sampler plate. For only 5 little measly coins, I grab the fromages and we make haste. They ride secure within my pack and follow us to Musée Rodin. We pause to contemplate the thinker when comes our way a stinky man. And later, in the subway too, in a packed train car with 0 vent. It was hot that day, and to our dismay, no French were wearing deodorant. But finally we reached the beautiful Seine, our picnic destination. We bought some bread and local wine. It was time to get our cheeses on. The river sparkled Notre Dame. Our hands were raised in a victory toast. We traveled far, but not in vain. Our bag the finest cheese did boast. But then, just then, as zipper unzipped, anticipation and reality did meet, there arose such a ripened, pungent air, like ammonia and ass and moldy feet. And then we laughed uncontrollably at our unintended potpourri. Oh my, we cried, that smell was us. But how we loved that stinky cheese. Yes, how we love that stinky cheese.